So we come to the 8th video of boxing history, fight careers, match by match, and it seems to be the theme of the 60s heavyweights at the moment. I am going to go on to other weights, and it's Jerry Quarry. So picking from the same era at the moment. Jerry Quarry was born in 1945. It ended the Second World War, 1945, May the 15th, 1945. So he's one of them fighters, I think, if you've been handled differently when he was younger, a bit like Wilfred Benitez, his sort of shelf life wouldn't have gone out so soon. Yeah, it was a right warrior. Jerry Quarry goes very underrated. Obviously, there's the rumours of I think even George Foreman admitted it actually, that he give him trouble in sparring, but obviously sparring, fighting's fighting. So with that, we go to his fight record. So we start off with Jerry Quarry's first fight. He fights Gene Hamilton, and he beats Gene Hamilton on points over 4 rounds on May the 7th, 1965 at the Memorial Coliseum in Los Angeles, California. Then Jerry Quarry's second fight, he fights John Henry Jackson and beats John Henry Jackson by 4-round KO on June the 3rd, 1965, Olympic Auditorium at Los Angeles in California. So yeah, 1965 was the year when Muhammad Ali beat Sonny Liston for the second time on May the 25th of that year, 1965. Jersey Joe Walcott the referee, and that Fleischer at ringside, stopping Sonny Liston in the first round. And June the 1st is synonymous with, unfortunately, Muhammad Ali's death. He died June the 3rd, 2016. Obviously, this is 1965 here. So we go to Jerry Quarry's third fight. He gets a unanimous decision over 6 rounds on June the 17th, 1965 at the Olympic Auditorium at Los Angeles in California. Then Jerry Quarry's fourth fight, he fights Dave Senti, wins by unanimous decision over 6 rounds on June the 24th, 1965 at the Olympic Auditorium in Los Angeles, California. Then on the so Jerry Quarry's fifth fight, he fights Willie Davis and beats Willie Davis by 3-round KO. 3-round KO at the Olympic Auditorium in Los Angeles, California. Yeah, 1965 was also the year when Muhammad Ali defended his title just once against Floyd Patterson on the 22nd of November of that year also, while this was all going on. Obviously Jerry Quarry's just starting out his career here. Let's make sure. Yes, so let's go back. Yes, so Jerry Quarry fought Joe Frazier twice. He beat Mac Foster, and he was a banger, Mac Foster, with a lot of knockouts. And he beat Ernie Shavers, actually, stopped Ernie Shavers. Beat some real punchers. And beat Ron Lyle. So they're all good wins, even though he lost a lot to a lot of good fighters. So just make sure I haven't missed these. So John Henry Jackson, Jerry Quarry beats in his second fight by KO in the 4th round. And then his third fight, he beats Lance Holmberg by unanimous decision, 6 rounds. Then 4th fight, Jerry Quarry beats Dave Senti by unanimous decision. And then his 5th fight, Willie Davis. So Willie Davis, he beats Willie Davis on the 16th of June 1965 at Olympic Auditorium in Los Angeles, California. Then Jerry Quarry in his 6th fight, beats Ray Junior Ellis by unanimous decision over 6 rounds on the 29th of July 1965, Olympic Auditorium in Los Angeles, California. So, 7th fight, Jerry Corey beats JP Spencer by a TKO in the 4th round on August the 2nd, 1965 at the Hacienda Hotel at Paradise in Nevada. Jerry Corey's 8th fight, he fights John Henry Jackson again and beats John Henry Jackson on unanimous decision over 8 rounds on August the 9th, 1965 at the Memorial Hall at Kansas City in Kansas. Jerry Corey's 9th fight, he beats Ray Junior Ellis by a TKO in the 3rd round on September the 23rd, 1965, Olympic Auditorium in Los Angeles, California. And Jerry Corey's 10th fight, he beats Milton Manley by a 1-round KO on October the 18th, 1965 at the Memorial Hall at Kansas City in Kansas. So busy 1965 there. Jerry Corey fights Al Carter and beats him by a TKO in the 6th round on October the 28th, 1965 at the Olympic Auditorium, Los Angeles, California. Jerry Corey's 12th fight, he fights Roy Crear and beats Roy Crear by a TKO in the 3rd round on November the 2nd, 1965 at the Municipal Auditorium at San Antonio, Texas. So, so 9th fight, he beats Ray Junior Ellis, beats him by TKO in the 3rd round on 23rd of September 1965. Done that one. Beats Milton Manley. His 10th fight beats Al Carter by TKO in the 6th round. In his 11th fight by a 6-round TKO, 28th of October 1965, he beats Roy Crear by a TKO in his 12th fight, 3-round TKO on November the 2nd at the that's where I ended up, Municipal Auditorium in San Antonio, Texas. So he gets a draw in his 13th fight. Jerry Corey, when he fights Tony Doyle, gets a unanimous decision over Tony Doyle over 10 rounds on the 11th of November 1965, Olympic Auditorium at Los Angeles in California. And he fights Roy Crear again in his 14th fight and wins by a TKO in the 3rd round on the 23rd of December 1965, Olympic Auditorium at Los Angeles in California. Then his 15th fight, he fights Eddie Land and beats Eddie Land by unanimous decision over 8 rounds on February the 3rd, 1966 at the Convention Center at Las Vegas. At the Convention Center at Las Vegas in Nevada. Jerry Corey in his 16th fight, he beats Prentice Snipes by a TKO in the 5th round on February the 17th, 1966 at the Olympic Auditorium at Los Angeles in California. Then he gets another draw. I think he had 2 draws against Tony Alonghi. Really goes under the radar, Tony Alonghi actually, in a hard error. He gets a draw with Tony Alonghi, split decision draw over 10 rounds on March the 4th, 1966 at Madison Square Garden. at New York City in New York. That was Jerry Corey's 17th fight. Then he's on everyone's record, George Scrap Iron Johnson. From this era, he fought everyone, this guy. So 18th fight, Jerry Corey beats George Scrap Iron Johnson by a TKO in the second round on April the 7th, 1966, at Olympic Auditorium at Los Angeles in California. Then Jerry Corey's 19th fight, he fights Al Jones and beats him by unanimous decision over 10 rounds on May the 2nd, 1966, at a Municipal Auditorium at Kansas City in Missouri. Then, yes, that second draw with Tony Alonghi. Had a really good record at the end of his career, Tony Alonghi. Yeah, he got another draw with Tony Alonghi on points. Yeah, 10 rounds again. Tony Alonghi gets a draw. He gets a draw with Tony Alonghi over on points again over 10 rounds on the 27th of May 1966 at the Sports Arena at Los Angeles in California. Jerry Corey's 21st fight, he fights Eddie Machen, a man who took Sonny Liston the distance. And probably showed the way how to beat Ali, even though he didn't really win a round against Liston, but he fiddled him about a bit and just, you know, held and sort of survived, but which obviously Ali didn't. But I digress. So 21st fight, Jerry Corey beats Eddie Machen by a unanimous decision over 10 rounds on July the 14th, 1966 at the Olympic Auditorium at Los Angeles in California. And July the 14th, 1995, wasn't 96, it was 95. You had UFC 6, and Conor McGregor was born, I think it was 88, but he was born on the 14th of July. A little bit of a link there, always like to put them in. So Jerry Corey's 22nd fight, he fights Bill Nielsen and beats Bill Nielsen by unanimous decision over 10 rounds on the 20th of October 1966, the Olympic Auditorium at Los Angeles in California. Then Jerry Corey's 23rd fight, he fights Leslie Borden and wins by a KO in the 5th round of the Schedule 10 on the 28th of November. 28th of November 1966 at the Valley Music Hall, the Valley Music Theatre at Los Angeles in California. So Jerry Corey's 24th fight, he fights Joey Orbillo and wins a unanimous decision over 10 rounds on the 15th of December 1966, the Olympic Auditorium at Los Angeles in California. 1966, this year Muhammad Ali would fight Brian London, beating him 3 rounds KO at Earl's Court in England. I'm sure it was there, but it was on that date, 6th of August of that year. Brian London, the son of Jack London, a fighter who fought way back. And yes, so, and 66 obviously is that year of England winning the World Soccer Cup in England, beating Germany 4-2 in the final. But like I say, that Brian London fight against Ali was 6 days later. They won that on the 30th of July 1966, and Muhammad Ali beat Brian London 6 days later. So good day for sport in England. Well, not so good because he beat him. He lost the Englishman. I digress. So Jerry Corey's 25th fight, he fights Al Jones and wins by a KO in the 5th round of a scheduled 10 rounder on January 11th 1967 at the Civic Auditorium, San Francisco in California. Now, that man I was talking about, Brian London. Yeah, this will be after that. Joey Corey fights Brian London and beats him by unanimous decision over 10 rounds on March the 9th, 1967 at Olympic Auditorium at Los Angeles in California. Then we have Alex Mintef. He fought Ali in his 9th fight and lost by a 6-round TKO. That was way back in 1961 on the 7th of October 1961, Alex Mintef. But here he is, Alex Mintef fighting Jerry Quarry. In Jerry Quarry's 27th fight, he beats Alex Mintef by a KO in the 3rd round of Schedule 10 on April the 27th, 1967, Olympic Auditorium at Los Angeles in California. Now he gets a draw in his 28th fight with Floyd Patterson, a majority decision draw over 10 rounds on June the 9th, 1967 at the Memorial Coliseum at Los Angeles in California. Now we come to Billy Daniels, who fought Muhammad Ali in his 14th fight and lost by a 7-round TKO on the 19th of May 1962. But here Billy Daniels is fighting Jerry Quarry. So Jerry Quarry's 29th fight, he fights Billy Daniels and wins by a KO in the 1st round on September the 15th, 1967 at the Sports Arena at Los Angeles in California. September the 15th, 1978 would be the rematch of Muhammad Ali v Leon Spinks. When he becomes the first man to win the heavyweight title 3 times, beating Leon Spinks on points, getting revenge from his September the 15th, 1978 match, where he lost on points to Leon Spinks. And that 1978 year would be the year of the World Cup, Argentina World Cup, where Argentina won the World Cup, beating Holland 3-1 in the final. In Argentina they won, that was the same year, but we're back September the 15th, 1967. Jerry Quarry's 29th fight was. So, Jerry Quarry's 30th fight, he fights Floyd Patterson and gets a majority decision draw over 12 rounds on the 28th of October 1967, the Olympic Auditorium at Los Angeles in California. Then, yeah, Thad Spencer was part of there was like a tournament. I think this might have been that tournament. Thad Spencer, you had in there, Jimmy Ellis won the tournament for the WBA, I think it was at this time, but I'm digressing. This might have been part of that, I'm not sure. But Jerry Quarry's 31st fight, he beats Thad Spencer and beats Thad Spencer by a 12-round KO for Schedule 12 in the last round on February the 3rd, 1968 at the Oakland Arena at Oakland in California. So Jerry Quarry's 32nd fight, he fights Jimmy Ellis, the stablemate of Muhammad Ali, a man who started at middleweight, fought the likes of Georgie Benton down there. I think he might have lost to Georgie Benton, the great exponent of the Philly Shell. Georgie Benton, good trainer as well, later on. So Jerry Quarry's 32nd fight, he fights Jimmy Ellis. He gets a majority. He loses to Jimmy Ellis on a majority decision over 15 rounds on April the 27th, 1968, at the Coliseum Arena at Oakland in California. That was for the vacant WBA title. I'm sure he got to the final. There was a little tournament, 2 or 3 fights. He got to the final and lost to Ellis, I think, beating Thad Spencer on the way. Maybe even Floyd Patterson on the way. It's definitely them. Yeah, I think so. But he definitely beat Thad Spencer. Yes, so I'm digressing. So, in 1968 was the year of the Summer Olympics in Mexico, George Foreman won a gold in the heavyweight division, and also it was the year of the Winter Olympics in Austria, in Innsbruck, Austria. So we come to Jerry Corey's 33rd fight against Bob Mumford. He beats Bob Mumford by a TKO in the 5th round of a Schedule 10 on November 11th, 1968 at Phoenix Forum at Phoenix in Arizona. Then Jimmy Ellis's 34th fight. He fights Willis Ells and beats Willis Ells by unanimous decision over 10 rounds on November the 19th, 1968 at the Freeman Coliseum at San Antonio in Texas. So Joey Croy's 35th fight, he fights Charlie Reno. And he beats Charlie Reno by a TKO for Schedule 10 on January 10th, 1969 at Seattle Center Coliseum at Seattle in Washington. And 1969 was the year, unfortunately, we saw the passing of Rocky Marciano, a plane crash a day before his birthday, September the 1st. He died on August the 31st, 1969. It was a day before, that's 31st, that's right. And also it was the year in history when Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon, going up with Michael Connolly and Buzz Aldrin. So Jerry Croy's 36th fight, he fights Aaron Eastling and beats Aaron Eastling by a 5-round KO in the 5th round of a Scheduled 10 on January 26th, 1969, Memorial Auditorium at Canton in Ohio. Then Jerry Croy's 37th fight fights a big guy in Buster Mathis, who qualified for the 1968 Olympics, beating Joe Frazier. I think it was twice in the amateurs. He definitely beat him once. Then he pulled out with a bad hand. And the rest is history. Joe Frazier took his place and won gold. And then beat Buster Mathis in the pros also. So Joey Croy's 37th fight. He beats Buster Mathis on a unanimous decision over 12 rounds on March the 24th, 1969 at Madison Square Garden at New York City in New York. So next one's for the title. Jerry Croy's 38th fight. He fights Joe Frazier for the first time and loses on a retirement in the 7th round against Joe Frazier of a Schedule 15 on June the 23rd, 1969 at Madison Square Garden at New York City in New York. Then Jerry Croy's 39th fight, he fights Johnny Carroll and beats Johnny Carroll by a 1-round KO for Schedule 10 on August 11th, 1969 at Aldrich Arena at St. Paul in Minnesota. They had a few good fighters in the past come from there. Again, the Gibbon brothers, but I won't go into detail. St. Paul's Phantom, etc. So, but anyway, I'm digressing. Let's stick to these times. So, Jerry Corey's 40th fight. He fights Brian London again and wins by a KO in the 2nd round of a Schedule 10 on September the 3rd, 1969 at the Oakland Arena at Oakland in California. Jerry Corey's 41st fight. He fights George Chavallo and wins by a KO in the 7th round of a Schedule 10 on December the 12th, 1969 at Madison Square Garden at New York City in New York. So, Jerry Corey's 42nd fight, he fights Rufus Brassell and beats Rufus Brassell on a KO in the second round on March the 3rd, 1970 at Miami Beach Convention Center at Miami Beach in Florida. And 1970 was the year that Brazil would win the World Soccer Cup in Mexico, beating Italy 4-1 in the final, but beating England on the way to the final, and Gordon Banks making that save of the century against Pelé. Yeah, Bobby Moore in that side. But yeah, in the final they beat Italy 4-1. They beat England in the earlier stages. So, Jerry Corrie's 33rd fight. He fights George Scrap Iron Johnson again and wins a unanimous decision over 10 rounds on March the 19th, 1970, at the Olympic Auditorium at Los Angeles in California. Now, this is a good win coming up. A man who was rumoured to knock out Sonny Liston in sparring. Obviously, sparring, fighting, different, but when he fought Ali, he had a record. It was pretty much like John Mugabe's when he fought Hagler, pretty much all knockouts. Well, it was all knockouts, John Mugabe's. I think Matt Foster's was as well. And he had a cracking little sort of two-knuckle punch he used to throw round, sort of Sugar Ray Robinson style. Two-knuckle punch he'd throw round to the ribs. Matt Foster, ex-Marine. But I digress. So, Jerry Corrie's 44th fight, he fights Matt Foster and beats Matt Foster by a TKO in the 6th round on June the 17th, 1970 at Madison Square Garden at New York City in New York. Then, Jerry Corrie's 45th fight, he fights Stanford Harris and beats Stanford Harris by a TKO in the 6th round on September the 8th, 1970 at the Miami Beach Municipal Auditorium at Miami Beach in Florida. Then, this was Muhammad Ali's comeback fight after he got banned, and the only state we're taking was Georgia. And in the film The Greatest, someone tried to assassinate Muhammad Ali in his training camp. So I presume that is true. That was before this fight. I presume that is true. Sometimes not always true. There's a bit, obviously there's the folklore stuff like him throwing his medal in the river, which wasn't true apparently. He just lost it, he said. But, and then he said Muhammad Ali again. It's Jerry Corrie, got Muhammad Ali on a brain here. Jerry Corrie in his 46th fight, fights Muhammad Ali and loses and protests on the 3rd round retirement of a scheduled 15 on October the 26th, 1970 at the Municipal Auditorium at Atlanta in Georgia. It was the only state would take Ali at the time. So back to Jerry Corrie though. Jerry Corrie in his 47th fight, he fights Dick Gosha and wins a unanimous decision over 10 rounds on June the 18th, 1971 at the Ocean Shores at Washington, in Washington. So 1971 was the year when Ali Fraser would start their trilogy on March the 8th, 1971. It would end on October the 1st, 1975, The Thriller in Manila. So, yeah. So we come to Jerry Corrie's 48 fights. He fights Tony Doyle and wins by unanimous decision over 10 rounds on July the 24th, 1971 at the Playboy Club Hotel at Lake Geneva in Wisconsin. So, Jerry Corrie's 49th fight, he fights Jack Bodell and knocks Jack Bodell out by KO in the 1st round of a Scheduled 10 at on November the 16th, 1971 at the Empire Pool in London, England. So, Jerry Corrie's 50th fight, he fights Lou Bailey and wins by unanimous decision over 10 rounds on December the 2nd, 1971 at the Veterans Memorial Auditorium at Des Moines in Lower, USA. Then Joe Croy's 51st fight. He fights Eduardo Corletti, and he beats Eduardo Corletti from Argentina by a KO in the first round for Schedule 10 on April the 17th, 1972 at the Forum at Inglewood in California. Then again he travels to Britain. Joey Corey in his 52nd fight fights Larry Middleton and beats Larry Middleton on points over 10 rounds on the 9th of May 1972 at the Empire Pool in London, England. 1972 was the year of the Munich Olympics, the Summer Olympics. Unfortunately, you had that Black September incident happen there. In Munich, the Summer Olympics, you had Dan Gable, the wrestler there. You had Tifilio Stevenson putting his first appearance at the Olympics, the first of 3 which would win golds. 76 in Montreal we win, and 1990 at Moscow. Obviously, Cuba boycotted the 84 Los Angeles Olympics, so he couldn't get his 4th. So Tifilio Stevenson, Dan Gable was there. Kualugin Bayanmonk, who was a Mongolian wrestler who won 10 Mongolian-style wrestling titles, was there, and he got silver in it was either the freestyle or the Greco, but obviously the style he did was Mongolian, which they wouldn't allow any on the ground, but I won't go into detail with that. That's another sport. But and 1972 also was worth mentioning. You had the Winter Olympics in Japan in Sapporo. So obviously 1972, another one as well to think of was Floyd Patterson. Finished his career then on the 20th of September 1972. The other time he fought on 20th of September 1972, Floyd Patterson, he fought Henry Cooper in 1966, 20th of September. But again, go back to this year, I'm digressing a lot. 1972, 20th of September 1972. In this year, you had Floyd Patterson retire after his fight with Muhammad Ali getting beaten. That was the last fight he'd had, basically. Whether he retired on that night, I think he did. So, back to, okay, I'm digressing quite a lot. 51st fight, Jerry Corey beat Eduardo Corletti from Argentina by a KO in the first round, scheduled 10 on April the 17th, 1972, at the Forum at Inglewood in California. Then he fights Larry Middleton, who got the name of a jawbreaker, I'm sure. I think he broke the jaw of Joe Bugman when he fought him. And Ken Norton broke the jaw of Ali when he fought him in his first of their trilogy fights. So when they fought, there was a match. It was called the Battle of the Jawbreakers. I saw it as Larry Middleton and Ken Norton, but I digress again. So 52nd fight, Joey Corey fights Larry Middleton, beats him on points over 10 rounds on May the 9th, 1972 at the Empire Pool in London. Now, second match against Muhammad Ali, same result really. For the NABF, North American Boxing Federation title, Jerry Corey loses to Muhammad Ali by a TKO, the 7th round of Schedule 10, 19 seconds into the 7th round. One of these he really protested, was running about, people holding him back. But this was at the Convention Center at Las Vegas in Nevada. So, now, later to be a very good referee, Randy Newman, a fighter here against Corey. Jerry Corey fights Randy Newman in his 54th fight and beats Randy Newman by a retirement in the 7th round of a Schedule 10 on January the 5th, 1973. Madison Square Garden. at New York City in New York. Yeah, and this was the year that Muhammad Ali fought Joe Bugner, and he fought Norton. But again, I won't go into details. So, now another good win. He did well with punches a lot of times. When it was real punches, he fought. Fraser beat him pretty much on work rate and punching, but here he's got Matt Foster and Ron Lyle and Ernie Shavers he beats. But 55th fight we're going to. So 55th fight, Jerry Corey beats Ron Lyle, ex-convict, by a unanimous decision over 12 rounds on February the 9th, 1973 at Madison Square Garden at New York City in New York. 1973 was the year that Bruce Lee died. He died on 20th of July of this year, 1973. Bruce Lee was born on 27th of November 1940, but he died, 33 years old there. So, Jerry Corey's 56th fight, he fights James J. Woody. And he beats James J. Woody by a TKO in the second round, Schedule 10, on the 31st of August 1973 at the Convention Center, Las Vegas, Nevada. At Las Vegas in Nevada. 31st of August, it was literally on this day of his 56th fight against James J. Woody, on 31st of August. It was Rocky Marciano's birthday. It was 4 years since his, it was 4 years since his death, day before his birthday. His 46th birthday on September the 1st. He died in 69, this is 73. So on this day was 4 years to that day exactly that Rocky Marciano died there. So 57th fight for Jerry Corey. He fights Tony Doyle and beats Tony Doyle by a TKO in the fourth round, September the 10th, 1973, at the Forum Inglewood in California. And here's the other good win. Again, he did well with punches, stopping Shavers. So, one of the biggest bangers of all time. So, 58th fight, Jerry Corey beats Ernie Shavers by TKO in the first round of Schedule 10 on December the 14th, 1973 at Madison Square Garden at New York in New York. So, now Joe Alexander, was this the one where they were both putting each other down left, right and centre? I think it might have been. But Jerry Corey wins this one, I'm sure it was. It was a seesaw battle going back and forth, I think, from what I remember. Sure this was the one where Corey had like that. With Joe Alexander. Jerry Corey beats Joe Alexander in his 59th fight by a KO in the second round of Schedule 10 on May the 8th, 1974 at the Nassau Coliseum at Uniondale in New York. 1974 was the year that Germany would win the World Soccer Cup in Germany, beating Holland 2-1 in the final. Holland would also lose in 1978 in the cup final, losing 3-1 to the home side again, Argentina that time. But 1974 here, that was, and in this year, I think it was 28th of January 1974, you had Ali v Fraser. So, with that, further ado, we go to Jerry Corey's 60th fight, which is against Joe Fraser. He loses the second time to Joe Fraser by a TKO this time in the fifth round of Schedule 10 on June the 17th, 1974 at Madison Square Garden at New York City in New York. And again, he refereed that second one. I know he refereed one of the Corey v Frasers. It was the second, I'm sure. The great Joe Louis refereed that fight. Now, Jerry Corey's 61st fight, he fights again George Scrap Iron Johnson, wins by unanimous decision over 10 rounds on the 25th of February 1975 at Honolulu International Center at Honolulu, in Hawaii. And a day before that, in 1977, so 24th of February, I think, it was, Floyd Mayweather was born. That was 77. And the 26th of February, you had Chuck Wetton, who was born, and Jackie Gleason, the actor, was born, and Will Frowley was born then. But again, back to boxing. Obviously, 1975 was the end of that Full of Manila with Ali and Fraser on October the 1st of this year. So, Joey Corey's 62nd fight was against Ken Norton, and he loses to Ken Norton by TKO in the 5th round of a scheduled 12 on March the 27th, 1975 at Madison Square Garden at New York City in New York for the vacant North American Boxing Federation title, NABF title. Ex-footballer in the Marines. He had an argument on the football pitch and turned to the boxing team and never looked back. He had a son who's a professional American footballer also. So, cracking cross-arm guard. But it's a bit more static than a lot of other guys with a cross-arm guard. And sometimes we'll lose to punchers, real punchers like Early Shavers, but Jerry Cooney. But again, he was probably past his best then. But cracking fighter still. So I digress. Jerry Corey's 63rd fight. He fights Lorenzo Zanon and beats Lorenzo Zanon by a TKO in the 9th round of a Schedule 10 on November the 5th, 1977 at Caesar's Palace at Paradise in Nevada. Now, this is exactly the same date when Jimmy Young lost to Ken Norton. So I wonder if it's on the same bill. Highly likely it might have been. November the 5th, 1977. That's exactly the same day. I'm sure that is. I'm going to do another one with who was on the bills a lot of these fights. But yeah. And obviously November the 5th, synonymous with 1994 when George Foreman come back to beat Michael Moorer and knock him out. To become the oldest heavyweight champion at that time. Might have been the oldest champion at that time actually, but oldest heavyweight champion. Obviously Bernard Hopkins was older, but actually if you go for the sort of the not as well-known organisations, actually Joe Bugner won a version of WBF against Bone Crusher Smith in Australia, and he was 48 I think he was, coming up 49. But again, we're going for the sort of well-known WBA, NSAC titles, WBC, whatever, but IBF or whatever. But yeah, so on November the 4th, 1993, you had the parachutist incident. It was the craziest night of boxing I've ever seen, with Evander Holyfield and Riddick Bowe 2. That was 1993 that happened. Yeah, so they're all near these. I don't know why I mentioned them, they're just sort of near. I just like to get a link sometimes. You also had Custer Marto, who died on the 4th of November 1985. So let's digress again. Like to get a few links. I don't know how they're linked. So Joe Croy's 64 fight, he fights Luke Guerra. He was a Bruno opponent later on, I'm sure. Rings a massive bell there. But Jerry Corey in his 64 fight fights Lou Guerra, beats Lou Guerra by TKO in the first round of the Schedule 10 on August the 31st, 1983 at Albuquerque Civic Auditorium at Albuquerque in New Mexico. And against that date, 31st of August, which was the date that Rocky Marciano died in 1969. So on this date, it would have been 14 years to the day on this day that Rocky Marciano died in a plane crash there, day before his 46th birthday on September the 1st. Again, quite like the linking dates, even though they're not completely linked. So, Jerry Quarry in his 65th fight fights James Williams and beats James Williams by a majority decision. Oh, this is when he tried to come back, it was. Yes, so that Luke Guerrero one was 1983, August, that's right. And this was 83, I forgot that to say that. He had a couple of wins, but quite an older guy at this point. I think it was where George Foreman come back and did what he was doing. He started off, his comeback. A lot of fighters did at the same time. I think even Ron Lyle tried it as well, and Jerry Corey, and obviously George Foreman coming back. But I don't know who started the craze. I'd have to think at that time. But yeah, well past his best days here. But 65th fight, James Williams gets beat by a majority decision over 10 rounds by Jerry Corey on November the 22nd, 1983 at Kern County Fairgrounds at Bakersfield in California. 22nd of November, synonymous with John F. Kennedy assassination in 1963. So on this date, Jerry Corey had his 65th fight. It had been 20 years to the day of that assassination. Obviously, you had the Lee Harvey Oswald assassination 2 days later on 24th by Jack Ruby, 24th of November 1963. Jack Ruby knew Barney Ross very well, the boxer, really cracking boxer. I'll put him right up there. Barney Ross, war hero as well. Fought in World War II, won medals of honour, saving many people. Many stories about him. Got addicted to morphine, unfortunately, but come back from it and lived to tell the tale. A lot of motivational speeches given on addictions, etc. So this is very sad to see this last part of Jerry Corey's career. A lot of damage had been done early in his career, unfortunately. Again, I'd imagine from a kid, really, from what I hear. But anyway, he had a good brother. Mike Corey fought, he was a light heavy. He fought Bob Foster, got put out by Bob Foster. But I mean, everyone did get put out by Bob Foster at that time, the greatest light heavies ever. So, I'm digressing. Jerry Corey's last fight, his 66th fight, he fights Ron Kramer and beats Ron Kramer by unanimous decision over 6 rounds. So he finished on 6 rounders on the 30th of October 1992. So there was about 3 comebacks by the look of it. Yeah, it was. I knew it was later than that, and obviously that didn't go very well. At 30th of October, at the Holiday Inn Trade Center at Aurora in Colorado, old Jack Dempsey country there. The 30th of October is synonymous with Muhammad Ali coming back to win the title for the second time in 1974 against George Foreman in Kanasha, Zaire, knocking him out in the 8th round. Unfortunately here it's synonymous with the end of Jerry Corey's career. And he was born in 1945, so he would have been, he was into his 40s. When he came back in 83 here, he would have been 38. And when he came back in 92, been 47, I think. Yeah, and I think it was that George Foreman, he hadn't won the title at this time, but he was still fighting good fighters, going the distance with people like Holyfield, Tommy Morrison. He did. Later on he fought, I think that was his last fight, George Foreman, Cannon and Shannon Briggs. Still doing well with them, but I'm digressing. Back to Jerry Quarry. I think one of his fights, he got in a hoo-ha with his brother the night before, I think, hurt his back and still fought. But Jerry Quarry, cracking fighter. I think he might have been handled different earlier, he not like took that much punishing early. I'm talking about his amateur days. I think he might have been even better. But great Jerry Quarry again. He can go under the radar. Such a tough error. This. So that's the end of that one. Bang.